know that I grew up Southern Baptist, and so in the Southern Baptist tradition, preachers have some sort of sense that when they get sick, that, you know, perhaps there was a sermon there that needed to be preached that the devil was trying to keep them from doing. Now, I don't know if I believe in the devil, but, you know, maybe I'll allow some spiritual forces that aren't that great. My daughter caught this stomach bug, which, you know, I'm on the latter phases of myself, and, you know, she went to the hospital this week. And so, you know, it's not like I could have a lot of time for crafting because I was 100% focused on that, and then I didn't feel good, and now I'm here, and, you know, I promised a sermon, and you're going to get your sermon. Don't worry, I'm not going to disappoint you. But I just want to say, you know, when you add up all the things, you start to think, well, oh, maybe I do got something to preach, you know, like if there's something out there that wants you so bad to stay home and just call it out sick this Sunday, perhaps there is something to say. And so all that's to say is I hope I live up to that, and I hope I live up to the articulation. This Sunday, we're going to be talking about reparations, and we're going to be talking about this space in particular. There's going to be 2 sermon talkbacks. You can come and you can talk to me in person if you're in person. And I don't know where we're going to do that, but probably right here, I would think. And if you want to stick around and chat with me about this and what excites you and what you don't like about it and all the sorts of different ways that you might feel, that's all good. If you're online, then there's going to be the opportunity for you to talk with me online. I mean, it'll start when this one ends, or, you know, close to it. So I would say, you know, around 12:15, but hang out on that Zoom link, okay? So in 1872, something catastrophic happened at First Baptist Church's building. And what happened was that while everybody was in worship, this is not to give you a little bit of a panic attack, but it might. While everybody was in worship, the floor caved in, and everybody went into the basement. Doesn't that's a little scary? Yeah. Anyway, construction wasn't what, you know, everybody says, oh, you want the house from 1872, its bones are good, but maybe not. Maybe you don't. So anyways, they all fell into this basement, and I've been thinking about this a lot. So one who avoided this fate was Nathan Branch, and so he dove out of a window, actually, to save himself. That's how real this was. This is not just like a small cave-in. This was, the floor gave out, right? So he dives out of a window to save himself at First Baptist. But such was his dedication that the next day he comes back and he pays for his window. In that event, a caved-in floor, I mean, that, and also some concerns about where we were in relation to Evanston and where we ought to be and what was more desirable. Well, that caused First Baptist to think about moving places. And so that's how we came to be right here in this building. Because when we talk about First Baptist, of course, we're talking about Lake Street Church of Evanston. Changed our name in the 1990s. Some of you were here for that name change, so you're like, wow, can we get to the point? But not everybody was here, so it's useful to sort of name our connections and name sort of who we were and who we are, because they all flow into one another. So First Baptist Church is us, and Lake Street Church is us after our name change. But there was very much like a physical wound that came into being that sort of caused that move. The floor literally gave way. The structure could not hold. And Nathan Branch was a part of that story. And I want to talk a little bit about Nathan Branch. So Nathan Branch was born a slave in Virginia. And he attempted self-liberation, which is more commonly referred to as running away or becoming a fugitive. And he served in the Civil War, and he wound up here in Evanston. And he was a really dedicated member of First Baptist Church, which was us, remember. He was the sexton. He took great pride in ringing the bell. He was a really important part of it. And he always sat in the balcony, along with all the other Black members of First Baptist Church, which I want to assure you was not an accident, because Black members of First Baptist Church had to sit in the balcony, whether through custom or the only pews being available for rental for Black folks being in that balcony. Those are all the ostensible reasons, but of course, the real reason is white supremacy, and we know that, and we know that they were forced to sit in that balcony. And so in 1882, after this building was freshly built, and after a financial panic, and after they had sat in, if you look around, this balcony, after they had sat in that balcony for a few years, in a simultaneous act of resilience and the building of independent Black institutions that we really want to celebrate here in Evanston, 10 black members of First Baptist asked for their letters of dismissal from First Baptist Church and started Second Baptist Church, which is our sister church and which we continued relationships with. And it was that simultaneous double move, that desire for independent black institutions and the sort of racism that made them feel like they couldn't be at home. That's what forms a wound that inhabits this place. You see, we built this building to get away from a wound, and yet we had another wound that we made here in this place. But you see, just as Nathan Branch's stolen labor was used to build a country that was not made for him, he worked to build a place, First Baptist, that was not for him. It was for its white members, and we need to be clear about that. Because this building is a beautiful and wonderful and historic place, a lively place, but it's also wounded. And I want to see some of the words that you use, because I don't want to say like it's a bad place, like we're in a bad place. This sanctuary is beautiful. Every time I take someone here, they say, oh, how beautiful it is. It's absolutely beautiful. People who have come here have found real sanctuary, real peace, real understanding, affirmation from a world that would not treat them justly, and they found that here. And it is simultaneously a wounded place. So I want to see how people are thinking about this sanctuary and thinking about this place. One writes community, comfort, a home for the spirit. Comfort, okay. Shell, half, beautiful. Community, attachment, which causes suffering. High maintenance. Okay, yeah. That's why, I wanted a mix. I wasn't all going just for good. Homey, traditionally comfortable. Potential for justice. A beautiful home, tasteful. I heard when Bob Thompson came in after the renovation in the 90s, he called it like preaching in a pumpkin. I think y'all got over that a little bit, but I can see a little bit that, preaching in a pumpkin. I think it's very comfort colors for sure, comfort colors. Potential, connection, community coming up all over again. I wish that it was more accessible, safe in every way. Joy, beauty, home, ambivalent, warm. Such rich irony this morning. Thank you for whoever wrote warm. Stable. Freedom. So interesting. Beloved community, acceptance. Inefficient. Tent. Odd. Home. Comforting, beautiful, historic, grateful, open, peaceful, true sanctuary, welcoming, peaceful, affirmed, welcoming, positive energy, community, graceful, historic, yes, sanctuary, home, anticipating, sacred holy space, with the spirit of abiding love of the presence, people, and ancestors. And another writes, in transition. So all that's to say is just kind of complicated, right? I mean, it is a little complicated. While you write that it's warm, it's obviously not warm here. So we can talk about sanctuaries and we can talk about spaces on many different registers, which you realize when you describe a place that's obviously not physically warm as warm. So we all know that it can be so many different things at the same time, even for the same person. And so this place has been a real sanctuary, but how do we dig down deep and how do we have some conversations about what I just said about this sanctuary, that the black members of First Baptist sat in the balcony, not because they were forming a club up there or because they thought it was fun, but because they had to. What does it mean that we carried around, we went from physical wound to spiritual wound when we participate in that? And let me leave no doubt about it, in case you're curious, back in the 1880s, we were likely probably, quote, the good white people then too. But the real thing I want to say is being good white people is not going to save you. if we are in a religious framework, we have to have something that's a little bit more than just striving to be, quote, good. I mean, I know that we don't get too much into Christian theology, but that's a fundamental tenet of Christian theology, so I'm going to pass it on. That it's necessary perhaps, but it's not sufficient. It's not what's going to liberate or save. And I've been doing a lot of work on thinking about the wounds here. And you've been doing a lot of work on thinking about wounds with reparations. And my colleague, Dr. Neighbors, the pastor of Second Baptist, he made this case recently, and I really like it, that places like Evanston, these small cities, have a unique capacity to act on these things. So I want to ask, what if we thought of ourselves, and what if we started to think of churches as being uniquely positioned to practice reparations as well? After all, we are still around. Isn't that great? We don't pass away in a generation. So we're still around as original transgressors. And so is Second Baptist. The original wronged party is still around. The possibility for connection there is something you've observed and you've been pursuing since the 1990s, and it's only grown. That's something that you've recognized as the capacities there as institutions that are uniquely positioned. We're also built on morality, and we're built on morals. We care about things. We care about things like justice, about love. We care about naming those wounds. In the end, naming those wounds is not really enough. One of the great regrets of my life is that as a preacher, I have too often confused preaching about something with doing something. Preaching about something doesn't actually do anything. It is just talking, but in front of people. And because it makes you really tired at the end of the day and you want to have a Sunday nap, you think, maybe I did something. But in reality, you didn't. You just had a long conversation, or you just talked a lot at people. But it felt like for a second there, I'm really doing something. And my regret, one of my greatest regrets in my life is I have given in to that illusion, that I have confused saying for action. I confused naming wounds with treating them, if we were to look at Jeremiah. And that relationship that we have with Second Baptist, I think that is revealing and continues to reveal and continues to do work on me and us in this place as trying to figure out how can we heal wounds, not lightly, as Ezekiel and other prophets state, but seriously, how can we dress these wounds? Because I often comfort pastors of small churches, which I started my career in. I started my career in a church that was perhaps 20 people on a Sunday. And I said, I comfort people who are pastoring and who are really feeling like, wow, nobody comes and nobody cares. And I say, well, who knows? Even if there are only 10 people there, what angels or what other clouds of witnesses could have been there? You don't know you never know what you're putting in the bucket, and you never know who's watching. You got to be able to keep it up, because it's not just about the numbers. It's not your fault mainline Protestantism is in decline. You got to think about it in different metrics in different ways. And usually they pretend to be comforted by this, so this is helpful. It also helps my ego that I think that this is a good comforting thing. So it all works all around. The point is, it's not all about numbers, and it's not all about attendance. But that statement about a great cloud of witnesses takes on a different tenor in this place, I think. I'm right here. So I'm looking at that balcony all the time. Whenever I preach a message, I'm looking at the balcony. I'm looking at its rich, beautiful, dark hues. I'm thinking, wow, this is really some beautiful wood. And I'm also thinking, and that's where the black members of First Baptist sat. So right here, I'm looking at this balcony while I'm preaching, thinking about people who experienced segregation in a spiritual home that called them siblings. Because the real wound for me, I hope it's not me. Anyway, because the real wound for me is that we could call Nathan Branch a brother. We could call him brother, which we do. That we could call Nathan Branch brother and demand simultaneously in the same breath that he sit in the balcony. That the words said one thing, but they were only used to cover up the actions that were grave and sinister. That's called hypocrisy, by the way. And rest assured, it is the gravest and most sinister issue confronting American Christianity. That when we say one thing and we do another thing. And everybody who wonders, why is the church in decline, or why is this not going how it was in the 1950s, is because of hypocrisy. I think that that's really the biggest issue at stake. So, how do we fix it? How do we think about healing the wounds of this place? I don't know. I mean, I'm sitting up here and I'm starting a conversation. That's really what this is to do. Just so you know, this is the American Baptist Church. I can't really do anything. You're going to have to do a lot of this. But I want to hold your hand and be a bit of a doula with you in thinking about how we might give birth to thinking about reparations here in this place and how we might heal some wounds. But in doing so and addressing those wounds, I think we can solve the real problem of hypocrisy. We can practice what we preach, to use an idiom. We can take wounds seriously and heal them seriously, not lightly. Now, I think that how we do that is we can have this opportunity to restore Second Baptist Church to ownership of this building. I say not give them half of the building. I'm not saying give them half of the building because I don't think that that's really the word that needs to be used. I think it's restored. I think we can restore them to their ownership because when they left this place, they didn't take any capital. They didn't take any equity. They removed themselves from a place that was white supremacist and racist, and we became, in that moment, I think we had a wound at our center. And the way to heal that wound is not to say, well, this is all okay, and really what we need to do is we need to tell that story more. I think a lot of you knew that story this morning. What we need to do is think about what are our resources at our disposal for healing that wound. What's our capacity for acting? What's the capacity not for saying peace, 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 but there is no peace, but saying actually this was a grave sin that happened. There was a grave transgression that occurred, and we can act right now. We don't have to act right now. Don't worry. I'm not actually suggesting that. It's actually a bad word. See, when you get preaching, sometimes you don't pick your words. You just sort of say, but we can act in order to address that wound. And I think that we can do that through restoring Second Baptist ownership. Now, I don't know what they're going to use that for. I'm really hopeful that we could be two congregations worshiping in the same place. Wouldn't that be the most amazing thing in the entire world? Yeah. But I think they like their building over there just fine too. And I think that, there's going to have to be conversations both here and conversations there about what that would look like, about that partnership. But I think that when we're having our conversations and we're thinking about what we can do when we restore Second Baptist ownership, we're rethinking what a church is. Because a church a lot of times it's a property holder, and we got a nice piece of property here, and it's a spiritual center, and it's all these sorts of different things. But what if it were a place that's thinking through relationships? What if it's a place where wounds are healed? What if it's a place that serves as a model for how all these different communities, and rest assured there are thousands of Second Baptists that are black institutions split from First Baptist out there in the world. What if it's a model for racial reconciliation in this country? What if we were uniquely positioned for a time such as this? What if you were called to this work? What if you're in this pew right now for a reason? If you're a visitor, no pressure. I'm really sorry. You know what I mean? I feel really bad for you. But, I think it's a good sermon, so I don't feel too bad for you. But I feel a little bit bad that, I'm saying, you could be in this pew for this reason. Although maybe you are in the pew for we'll let God decide. And so that's going to take some time to sort out, and I get that. And I know a lot of people are going to have a lot of questions, does that mean we get to worship at 10:30 a.m.? Well, it might not, depending if we're sharing a space. Does that mean that my office is always going to be my office? It might not if we're sharing a space. It really requires some decentering of yourself to really think about what it would mean to be co-owners of a place with another church. But I think that it can be done. I think that we are in a spiritual place where it can be done. Because Second Baptist Church, spiritually, I believe, owns 50% of this building, and legally it owns 0%. And how we close that gap is the only spiritual question I believe that matters to us. If we don't address that, I worry about us spiritually. I worry about what we can do. I worry about the advance we can make in such a wounded place without really treating it seriously. But if we do something about that, look, I told you, I've drawn on this. My past as a Southern Baptist is, even in a progressive space where we got some people are like, oh, God, whatever. I'm still saying that a spiritual revival can break out. I want to claim that. I want to claim that you can have a spiritual revival because you're solving that fundamental problem. You're solving that problem of hypocrisy. You're saying, yes, I want to treat wounds seriously, and yes, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of that movement for reparations here in this place. But nothing makes me feel more anarchist than telling you that everything you have and everything you own isn't really yours anyway. It's God's. And so that's a bit in tongue-in-cheek. That's a classic stewardship line to try to get you to give more money to the church, but hey, whatever. but the Spirit is there, right? So we can use our stewardship of thinking about a building that we didn't create and we didn't build in order to right wrongs and practice a spiritual discipline of repair that we are called to. And so I have no doubt that this is the work that we're called to, that you've been here for such a time as this, that we've been building that relationship with Second Baptist to lead to a culmination of a point where we can really take some things seriously, take wounds seriously, and heal them seriously. I have also no doubt that it would create an absolute spiritual revival, because for 140 years, it is my, I'm using I statements, I'm preaching. I know some people are going to disagree with me, although I hope to reach right across that aisle and bring you to my position eventually. But what I'm saying is that for 140 years, we've claimed sole and exclusive use of a place that wasn't ours to claim sole and exclusive use. And that's a wound. What is before us today is the capacity to heal that wound. For me, it is the spiritual question of a lifetime. For you, I think it's your spiritual question for a lifetime. It is also a spiritual opportunity of a lifetime to be a part of something that matters in a space that took something seriously and thought about racial reconciliation, creative, in good ways. And I'm losing my voice. So I love you, and I really want to invite you on this journey. Come and talk after church, and rest assured it's the start of the journey. I know a lot of you, especially my detail-minded people, of which I'm not, you have a lot of questions about how that work out. I'll tell you, it's going to take a long time to work out. It's going to take time to work out, and Second Baptist is going to have to do its own discernment and all that. But this is the start of a journey. And don't forget, just talking about it, just praying about it, or just listen, even worse, just listening to somebody preach about it is not the same thing as doing something about it. So I'm really looking forward to starting this conversation with you and to healing wounds, the wounds that were at the center of that first church that just the floor gave out, and so we moved here and we made our own spiritual wounds, but now we can heal it. I invite you to that work.